Pod in My Noggin, hosted by CK Sims, creating a platform to elevate, educate, and heal by creating a space where people can share their stories of struggle, triumph, and redemption. CKS Media.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Pod in My Noggin. Thanks for tuning in. I'm your host, CK Sims, and today we are joined by Mr. Matt O'Neill. He is the author of a new book called, oh gosh, I'm having one of those moments, Good Mood Revolution. Perfect, I remembered. And he is also the host of the podcast of the same name. Helming and calling in today from South Carolina in the United States. I'm having one of those moments. I get them. I'll tell you about them. Matt, welcome to the show.
CK, man, I am so freaking pumped to be here with you today, my man.
Well, thank you very much. I am also very happy to have you here. Listen, I have not heard your podcast yet, but I'm gonna. And the reason is simple. I have a busy life. I'm trying to build something, but when you're trying to build something, you're typically pulled in a lot of different directions. As I was reading, and I was telling you just before we started recording, I was reading up on you, looking at your website, looking at what you're doing, and like who you are as a person. That really resonates with me. And so I want to talk about that. How'd you get, how did Matt, well, first let's tell people what Good Mood Revolution is all about.
Yeah, the Good Mood Revolution is about how happiness is truly a choice. And that we can make that choice at any moment, regardless of how crappy things in our life feel like they're going. We can still choose to be happy at any moment. I know that this is kind of a big claim, and sometimes we feel like we don't have that choice, but we always do. And there's just 8 things that get in the way of our happiness. These are the 8 signature bad moods. We all experience them, but they're all really universal, and there's a way out of each of them. So my book, the first half of the book, is about what those 8 bad moods are, and then how to get out when you're in any of those 8 moods, the specific out route to get back to happiness. And the second half of the book is really just practical tactics on how to stay happy, like stay in peace, stay in joy, stay loving, stay kind for longer periods of time, because the longer we stay in those really good mood states, the more good we do in the world. Happy people are not out there hurting everyone. Happy people are out there making everyone feel so good, right? And so I just want everyone to feel good so that we all lift each other up rather than tear each other down.
Love this. Love it, and it resonates with me on just a very core personal level. So your book is kind of like roadmap, if you will. If people who are listening or see snippets of this on social media want to figure out why they're unhappy, where in those 8 moods do they fall, the unhappy ones, and how they can segue their lives out of that mood into, say, a happier mood and keep it sustainable. Would you say from your experience that it's an immediate shift, or it's something that does take work?
Yeah, it's only taken me 15 years to figure this out. So yeah, it's a lot of work. It's a ton of work, CK. And you know this, right?
Yep.
Personal growth is a never ending journey. And our emotions are really complex things. I'll tell you this, though, the more we work at it, the better it gets. And it's just a skill set. It's a skill set. It's like everyone's chasing happiness. Every single person alive wants happiness. Now we go about it in the wrong ways, because society tells us to go after happiness and, by chasing status, money, fame, external things, success. They say, oh, if you're, society's the more successful you are, the happier you'll be. Just look at any TV commercial, any social media post. It's like, if you just project this image of perfection, then you'll be happy. But that's the opposite, man. We see these luxury car commercials, and we see people going on luxury vacations, and it just makes us all feel bad. Even the person posting it is in one of the 8 bad moods. Just to post something that would make other people want to compare themselves to you, that's a prideful post. And one of the 8 bad moods is stuck in a feeling of competition and pride over how my life is better than others, but some other people's lives is better than mine. We can never have happiness when we're comparing ourselves.
It's so true. You said it gets better. I want to add to that, right? So you said it gets better after time. I want to say not just better, but easier.
Totally.
Because as it is a skill set, you start out a new job and it's something you haven't really done before. There is a learning curve, but you are putting in the work, you're doing the task over and over again, you're being consistent, you're showing up because, well, that's your job, is to show up and do that work. Eventually, this job just becomes natural to you. Like, oh, I can't believe that, say 8 years ago, the thought of getting in front of somebody or a group of people was so far outside of my spectrum of possibilities that now after 8 years, I'm comfortable doing that, right? Like it's practice and it gets better and easier. I have a question. So was Matt O'Neill birthed from the womb happy? Like, did you come out happy and this wonderful human being who wants to share this message and uplift everybody? Is that where you're from?
Yeah, totally. 1,000%. I believe we're eternal souls, and I do believe my mission in this lifetime was to spread happiness and joy. When I was a kid, I used to have these notions that I would write books and like teach people how to feel good. However, I was really troubled. I had a kind of a maniac for a dad. And it was so unpredictable. We always were on eggshells because at any moment he would just blow up and explode, and you didn't know what you had done. And so you're always like questioning yourself, like if you were being good or if you weren't, or whatever, because he was just crazy, right? And completely unpredictable. And as a little kid, when you've got a very powerful maniac dad, it creates a lot of insecurity in you. And then he's belittling all of us and telling us all that we're not worthwhile, and that, that we're not lovable, and never telling us that he loves us. And in fact, telling us the opposite, that we're, pieces of crap. We believed him. I'm just a kid, right? Like, I'm just a little kid. This is a hero of mine, the person I'm supposed to look up to and follow. So I'm believing everything he says. And then he abandons us. And now my mom's a secretary, only making $24,000 a year. There's 4 of us, 4 kids. Plus her, she's got to feed 5 people on $24,000 a year. And it's like, hey, she would hand me a calculator. We get to the grocery store. She'd be like, all right, Matt, we got $30 for groceries for all of us this week. I need you to add up each one as it goes in the cart. And we'd get to the checkout line. I'd be like, we got to put these things back. We would put stuff back in the checkout line. So then there's all this fear and anxiety, right? And so when I was 6, I actually, like, school mandated I go to counseling because I told my teacher I was going to kill myself. Just this little kid, just a little innocent kid that should be having a fun childhood. There was just so much emotional stress on my little shoulders that, I wasn't happy, but I was here. Because I believe we're eternal. I think I chose the situation. I think I chose it. I think I chose my parents, and I wanted to like suffer and go through the darkness to show the way out. And obviously that's what the book has done, is it teach. I've been through all of the 8 bad moods, as deep and as dark as they can go. And, addictions, daily alcohol and drug addictions, just hating myself, wanting, basically any kind of thought pattern like that is like a self-annihilation thought pattern. And I figured my way out. I found my way out, not by myself, but by amazing others who had written great books about it, and who had given seminars, and coaches and mentors and psychologists, and so many different people have helped me figure out all these philosophies. Now I just want to share them with the world.
So, couple call out here that I've noticed. So when you joined this call and we first started talking, you have such an immense life in your eyes.
Oh, thank you.
It was the first thing that I noticed. Like, there's so much life in your eyes. So like you're radiating joy is what I saw. And so, but then you're telling me that as a child, upbringing was hard. Your dad was emotionally abusive. I don't know if he's physically
Yeah,
abusive.
absolutely. Emotionally.
And at 6, you had formulated that you wanted to kill yourself, and your school sent you to counseling, mandated you to go to counseling. Did it improve from 6 until graduation? Like I feel like maybe that's not what we planned on talking about, but I'm interested in the root of the story, because you're the example to me of someone who has gone through it and then come out the other side defining your own version of success, right? So
Yeah, so I got really tough in order to survive all of the, for me, like it really is survival. All of these 8 bad moods are survival moods, and they're driven by the ego. And so I leaned into some of the ones that protected me, and one of them was like anger and frustration, and I became a really angry teenager. And another one is pride. I became super arrogant. And no one could do it better than me. Nobody was better than me. And what it is like all of that, like tough exterior, that pride that I'm the best. It was basically a big suit of armor covering up somebody who was really, really insecure inside, because I didn't think I was lovable. Like deep down, I just didn't think I was. I didn't think I was worthwhile. And that's the lie of shame. And that's the first of the 8 bad moods, is this thought that we're not worthy as we are of love. But then I went out and I'm like, well, I'll prove to everybody I am worthwhile, and I'm going to succeed like crazy. I'm going to like conquer and win. And I'm going to get society's version of happiness. And I went out and I earned great income. And I said, okay, this income's great. I'm going to double it. I doubled it. I said, okay, I'm going to double it again. I doubled it again. And I'm like, doing all of these external things, and at the same time completely miserable, like so unhappy. And I look around, I'm like, this is everything I ever thought would make me happy. I grew the family I wanted. I was living in the house I wanted, driving the car I wanted, had the career income I wanted, and yet I wasn't happy. And I said, okay, I could continue to double down, and I could say, I'll just do more of what I'm doing. I'll get a faster car. I'll get a younger wife, whatever. This is like the midlife crisis that people can go through, or I'll stop trying to do the wrong way, and I'll start to focus on what actually creates happiness. And at that moment, this was 15 years ago, I switched everything I was reading about business success and started to learn about emotional success. And it changed everything. And just like we were saying, if you study it, and I teach it, if you study it, there are proven methods that make you feel amazing every single day, and then you have to practice them.
how old were you 15 years ago?
Yeah, so that was when I was 30.
You're 45 now?
Yeah.
We don't have midlife crises at 30. Might have identity crisis.
Right.
Definitely not.
But this is my point, though, is that you get it. I could have just continued to drive up that success through my 30s, and then you get into your 40s and you're like,
you're burnt.
Well, I'll just go ahead and just half the age of the wife, get the new car, and and I'll just redo what I did through my late 20s and 30s just again. And that's the midlife crisis. And we think that we're going to be happy if we just go ahead and be young again, right? But it's not.
All avoidance.
Yeah, it's total avoidance of what's actually going on, right?
And so one thing, like for me, the emotional abuse, your mom doing the best that she could, but then also like having the responsibility of like trying to calculate if you had enough for food, very anxiety driven. But your messaging from being a wee one was that you weren't good enough.
Totally.
And
that we weren't good enough, right? That all the other families that didn't have to count up how much money it cost for food, and that could actually wear like new shoes or, new clothes to school. Like I thought they were the happy ones. And so I was like, dude, I'll go ahead and get the new clothes and the new shoes, and then I'll be one of the happy ones.
Because as you mentioned, the lie that, society tells us is that happiness comes from material things.
Totally.
Or status, or how people view you. A therapist told me once, and I've had many, lots of wonderful, great therapists in my life. Told me once, and it was something that really, I don't know, kind of shook my foundation, my belief system at the time. I too, for different reasons, adopted the faulty assumption that I wasn't good enough, right? Or I wasn't lovable, or I'd never amount to anything. And so I just accepted that lie and based my whole life on that
it breaks my heart, man. Just to hear you say that, CK, like, my heart just breaks.
There's a happy ending, just like yours. But
yeah,
this therapist told me, because for a long time, I thought that, my parents were just being parents and that I was the sensitive one or whatnot. What people don't understand is that when you're a child, your parents, regardless if they're actively abusing or intentionally, but their actions impact your belief system. So this therapist told me one time, as a child, I'm not getting emotional about it. I've been talking all day, so my voice is going. As a child, your parents are your survival instinct, right? Like they're your survival. They provide house and home, food.
Yep.
So when things are happening that are tense or forms of abuse, or say you have an overreactive parent, whatever, the child cannot, for basic survival reasons, look at said parent and determine that they are the monster. They look inward and they decide that they must be the monster.
Oh man, that's so true. It's so true, because you can't bite the hand that feeds you.
You
And
can't.
so you're a kid and you're like, I need these two people to survive. I need them. So I need them to like me. So they can't be the issue, and I can't tell them that they're awful, or else they could kick me out, I could die. So out of survival, we look at ourselves and say, I must be messed up.
And so that shook my very belief system and was one of the many things that led to, I guess, what you did as well, but in a different format. Tell me about the moment, because you said we talked about your childhood. You were a high achiever. You kept building, stacking on top of stacking to find happiness, I guess, but you were miserable on the inside. You said you used alcohol and drugs. You started a family, I believe, if I remember that correctly. What was the moment? And if it wasn't just one, that's fine as well. But was there a moment in your life when you realized, oh shit, I got to change something?
Yeah, man. I had this total awakening reading a book. I was 25, and again, I was obsessed with success. So the first book I had read since high school was Think and Grow Rich. I'm like, oh man, yeah, I've heard that this book can help you become even more rich. So I'll read this book, Think and Grow Rich, and in that book, he was saying your life is exactly how it is because of the way you're thinking. And whatever you want, you just have to change your thoughts. And I'm like, wait a minute. Is this true? Like, are my thoughts really creating all the bad and all the good? And that was a total wake up moment for me. I ended up watching the movie The Secret. The Secret like takes it a step further, and Rhonda Byrne is saying your vibrational frequency, which is your emotional state, is attracting back to you other things that are vibrating at your state. So if you're in a low vibrational frequency, like anger, shame, guilt, hopelessness, sadness, fear, anxiety, if you're feeling these emotions, you're going to attract back situations that confirm that you should be afraid, that you should be angry, because you're just going to attract to you like a magnet, however you're feeling. And I'm like, well, I want to feel really good then because I want to attract back to me like lots of good stuff. And so that was like the first awakening, and it was in my late 20s. And then the second one happened in my mid 30s. And I had created, like I said, this really big life, lots of different moving parts, a ton of people working at this company I'd created. A lot of children were coming as well with my wife and I. And my life was so full of all this responsibility. And I'm like thinking that's what I really wanted. And I've got severe back pain, like debilitating back pain. I'm sitting in a chair, ice pack on my back, ice pack on my shoulder, ice pack on my knee. like padded things in the chair. In my car, there's a special thing for my back. And I'm reading this book, and it was by this guy named Dr. John Sarno. And he said he was a surgeon. He was a back surgeon for back pain. And he said 90% of all back pain has nothing to do with the back. And it has everything to do with repressed anger. And he specifically said, as you build this life that's so crazy responsible, there's a part of you that really resents what you're doing and why you're doing it, and is so angry that it's lashing back out at you and creating all this pain in your body. And as soon as you admit that you've got emotional problems instead of health problems, the back pain will disappear. And I was like, shoot, I've tried everything else. I've been to the acupuncturist. I've been to the chiropractor. I went to the surgeon. I'm like, dude, cut me. Like, I can't handle this. Just like whatever you got to do, make this back pain go away. So I figured I might as well just like try to believe that Dr. Sarno was right and that I had emotional issues. And sure enough, as soon as I went into his program, which was just admitting the rage that was within me, this anger that I'd been stuffing down probably since I was a kid, I started to pull out all of that anger and release it in a healthy way. Haven't had a back problem since. This is a decade now.
Your story and my story are so similar, so different. While it's not a focal point for me or a moment that I would say consider was pivotal in my change, recognizing and realizing and admitting that I had this burning rage that lived within. Where it came from, I kind of have some ideas. Where it's gone into kindness. And we talked about that before we started. So like I just channeled that rage when it was coming up, and I said, I want to take this rage and do something with it. But obviously, like going around and smashing things is not really going to bode well for like anybody. So how can I turn it? How can I turn it into something positive? And it just became my ability to say, take that rage and then turn it into compassion and start looking at people. Whereas pre-35, if you watch, I don't know how much I got into it with Lisa, but if you watch the last podcast, I did talk about pre-35 and post-35. Whereas 35 was the period in my life where I tried to end it. And then that was such a milestone and a catalyst for me to exactly what you had sort of with a book and all of that stuff, was realized that one person, one random, like, I don't even know, like, it's so frustrating because I don't even know if they were a doctor or a nurse or what they were. He was a gentleman who came into my room.
He was an angel.
Unit,
he was an angel.
Practitioner. An angel, yes. And his words, just stop swimming, which are the 3 words that changed my life. Because my thing was, I was constantly trying to stay above water and fighting against the depression and the anxiety and the fear and the low self-esteem and all of that, and just trying to function. And his message was, just stop fighting against it. Let it happen. Let yourself feel it, acknowledge it, move through it.
And to feel is to heal, right?
Yes.
Yeah, and
yes.
we're so afraid that these 8 negative emotions are going to swallow us up and that we won't be able to handle them if we face them head on.
And so many of us are just living in them, right?
Yeah.
And that's what people don't understand, is we're living in some variation of those 8 emotions, those negative emotions that you talk about in your book.
Yep.
They're just ever present in our lives, and they
ever present.
So
it's like a fish in water that doesn't realize it's in water. That was me in anger. I had no idea I was in anger. I was living in the city of anger. Anger was my water. I was breathing it in. I was exhaling it. And then what was happening is people were frustrated back at me. And I just kind of thought that's how the world was, is that you fight with people and they fight back with you. And it's totally in the world of anger. That is totally how it is. But out of the world of anger, nobody ever raises their voice or gets frustrated with you. Like, and if they do, your kindness and compassion is so ever present that whatever anger they're feeling just dissolves through it. It's just completely dissolved in your presence. But I didn't know that that was how it could be. Nobody had told me that. And, so now I just want to teach it. I just want to teach it because I know that when I was in the world of anger, I was creating a lot of conflict and a lot of pain in people's lives with the anger. And of course, it wasn't my fault. I had a super angry dad who then took his anger out on me. And then all of that repressed anger then manifested itself through me and then out of me because I was full of pain. I was expressing pain. But once we heal the pain, then we can start to express kindness like you've done.
I love that too. We're going to take a break, but I love that. I love the saying, trauma is not your fault, but recovery is your responsibility.
Oh, it's
We'll be
so
right
good.
back.
It's so good.
Life in Stitches by CK Sims. Available for purchase in paperback and ebook on all major platforms. Partner today with CK Sims and Pod and My Noggin to get in front of an audience that cares. You will be supporting mental health stories, tales of resilience, and uplifting content, aligning your brand with bringing goodness, authenticity, and kindness front and center. This spot could be yours. Do you have a story of struggle and resilience? One that you want to share with others and possibly help someone through their own struggles? Find the link in the show description and fill out the guest form today.
Welcome back, everybody. We are talking with Matt O'Neill, author of Good Mood Revolution. And I'm in a good mood right now because talking to you
Me too, man.
is giving me good vibes. So
CK, sit back at you, bro.
Before the break, we were talking about you were living in a world of anger and this was affecting other people's lives as well.
Yeah.
And then now when you healed that, it's a complete opposite. It's like someone flipped the light switch, right? Like your experiences with other individuals are completely different than they were previous time.
Yeah, there was a time when I was my own worst critic, and I thought that was a good thing. So one of the 8 bad moods is the emotion of guilt. And guilt can manifest itself in a way where we become a super people pleaser because we don't want anyone to judge us. And so we'll just please everybody. And I, of course, have been guilty of that. No pun intended. And then guilt can manifest as extreme judgment and criticism. And we can be super judgmental on ourselves. And then if we're really judgmental on ourselves, we're usually really critical of others. And so I thought that being super hard on myself, being like my worst critic, was helping me be better. I'm like, oh, if I'm just super mean to myself all the time about how I'm not doing good enough, I'll do better. And that's, it's logic. It's just flawed logic. And then everyone around me, everyone who worked in my company, I was so hard on them. I had ridiculously high standards. Nobody could hit them. And then I made them feel bad when they didn't hit them. And I told them they weren't doing good enough. And guess what? I had a lot of unhappy people working for me because I was mean. I was so mean to myself, right? And then I realized, again, through study, I became a self-improvement junkie. I realized that I would do so much better, like financially. This, again, I was driven by, if I can get financially where I want to go, I'll be worthwhile. I would do so much better if I was kind to myself and told myself all the ways that I liked what I was doing instead of all the ways I wasn't living up to it. Well, I started a little habit. This was 15 years ago. So I was 30. I started this journal habit. Every single morning, I wrote down 3 things I did well the day before. Just 3 things. I just had to come up with, okay, all right, I know you didn't do that well and you sucked at that and that went bad and you said the wrong thing and blah, blah, blah. What were 3 things yesterday that actually went well for you? And it took me a while. It still does take me a while. I do this every day to this day. Every day I write down 3 things I did well the day before. And you know what? After a period of time, you start to notice what you're doing well in the moment. And then instead of criticizing everyone, you start to notice what they're doing well. And I'm like authentically telling people who work with me, I'm like, oh, that was awesome. Hey, I heard you say this. Like, I couldn't believe, like, oh, and you look amazing today. Like, I'm just noticing everything that's going right in the world because I started to like count it and practice it. And this is a practice of noticing what's going right. And I went from probably one of the worst people to work with to we were named the #1 company to work for out of 470,000 companies last year. And it's just like a little shift from it's not good enough to I'm so proud of you.
If for anybody watching, listening, I love this conversation because while it does take practice and time, it really is that simple. It is changing how you speak to yourself. You had touched on some things just now that made me remember, like pre 35, my internal dialogue was very nasty to myself.
Me
Always
too.
have been. But and what I hadn't realized, I guess maybe I have, but not it did I haven't really thought about in a long time, is how nasty I was outward to other people. And I was so mean to people. And like my best friend, one of my best friends I've been best friends with for 25 years, we discovered this while we were on vacation 2 weeks ago. And we're like, oh my God, like our relationship can get lower insurance rates now. Like, what the hell? Like, I'm like, this is crazy. And so
I love that.
she's seen me through everything. And like we sometimes reminisce about, not reminisce, because I think reminiscing is like thinking back to the good old days. It wasn't, but we remember who I used to be and how I used to act towards people. And like when I think of those things now, pre 35, I'm 43 now, so it's been 8 years. When I think of those things now, I cringe. Like literally cringe. And I am now the person that if I were to witness myself as another being mean to someone, I will speak up and try to kindly, but assertive, call it out for what it is. And I do this in my roles when I'm consulting, when I have teams, like it's so crazy. So people at home, I always had the idea of like creating a course called the 90-Day Thought Warrior Program. It's one day maybe, but
Create it. Create it. We need it, CK. We need it. I'll take it.
I agree, but like it's helpful, but I don't have it yet. But Good Mood Revolution is available for purchase, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And we're talking about the revolution right now. I mean, and you've lived it. You've done this inner work that is required. So this, I think you both of us realized that being hard on ourselves wasn't helpful. And that being kind to ourselves was going to be a kinder way. How we do one thing is how we do everything. So how we talk to ourselves, of course, is going to be how we talk to the outside world. I also say that to my kids. My daughter will be like, man, so-and-so is so mean. She's always saying these mean things to me. I'm like, well, if she's saying that to you, imagine what she's saying to herself. Like, I feel bad for who she has to live with every day. Because I know that those words that are coming out of her mouth is, a young, sweet little girl that's being outwardly mean, that she really doesn't like herself inside. And so now I can have compassion for somebody who's being mean because I was that guy and I wasn't having any fun.
Here's the interesting part. So I just had a in real time moment of where I wanted to challenge you, but then stopped.
Let's do it. I love a challenge.
Using kindness. But no, it worked itself out. I do this, it happens in real time, and I realize things. So you're telling your kid, that this person who's being mean to them, think about what they're saying to themselves. And then like my automatic response is, but they don't get a pass. People don't get a pass because they're mean or because they're talking to themselves mean. However, then I remember how I look at other people who are doing things that are not kind. And I wonder what's behind all that. So it's the same thing. I don't give them a pass, but I do give them that thought process of like, what has happened in your life? What kind of choices have you had to make to get you where you are today?
Yeah,
Right?
we
I'm
don't,
going
I
to
mean,
use
especially
something.
especially you and I, and I'm sure just every person listening, we've been through some stuff, man.
Mhm.
Like it's been so challenging that I do have crazy amounts of compassion for people who are lost in addiction, who are
Oh,
creating
yes.
making super destructive choices, who are being outwardly cruel. I've got compassion for them. I know that if they're being outwardly cruel, they're also tormented by cruelty inside their own mind. As somebody who's been there and who has family members there now, like, I just think it's been a hard life for you, and I wish that it could be easier for you, and it can, if you're open to it. And it's going to take a lot of work. It's going to take a lot of work, but you know, you have to admit that you're probably not doing it right, and there's a better way to do it. This is again where pride gets in the way, and why pride is really one of the worst bad moods that we can get lost in, because pride thinks it's doing it right. When we're prideful, we, like I said, when I was in my 20s and late teens, I thought I was the best. I thought no one could do it better. And yet I was failing miserably in all these different ways, but you couldn't tell me that. I'd be like, you don't know what you're talking about. Like, I absolutely know how to do this better than you, and I'll prove it to you. And that was my pride talking. But at the same time, you know, it wasn't going well, and you just couldn't tell it to me. So pride's a sneaky one. When we get lost in this like emotion of arrogance, you can't teach anyone anything who already knows everything.
Well, there's that. And I do have a few of those people in my life who pride is a state that they are in. And I can see that with a few changes in their lives, they could have abundance of happiness and peace.
No, you
But
can't say it though. You can't say it.
you can't tell them.
It's the most frustrating. It's the
It
most
is.
frustrating theme because they don't think they need any help. But what's crazy is that someone who's lost in that arrogance, everyone else can see their flaws, but they won't admit them. And so that's why they say pride comes before the fall, because you don't admit and you won't take help and you won't take like constructive feedback. And so eventually the world has to like teach you a really hard lesson. And I had a few of those hard lessons that kind of, you know, created some humility in me. And a lot of some things like just crashed down around me in my pride and in my arrogance. And then I started to realize that humility was really a better way of being. And it's not easy though. I mean, choosing humility takes a lot of courage.
It does, but that's interesting too, because then if you in through the lens of Brene Brown, courage and vulnerability, humility are the same thing,
Hmm.
right? You can't have one without the other. They exist together. Life's vulnerable. And I mean, there's varying degrees, right? Like, I think that we are very similar in our mindsets, but like, I don't think I have the same amount of life in my eyes as you do.
Oh, you
Um,
definitely do.
but maybe I don't know. But it's interesting. But it's varying degrees. So like, I think for people listening at home, is like the first step is to recognize that things could be better,
Yeah.
right? And so if you are in a situation and you're having thoughts of like, why is this always happening to me? Or why does stuff never work out? Or I can't ever seem to get ahead, or I can't catch a break. If that's your normal sort of dialogue to yourself, and even internal, external, then that you have room. Like that's a spot to recognize that you have room for growth, because now you're living in one of those 8 negative emotions.
Yeah,
So you have room to move.
what's great about what you just said right there, CK, is that it's like that should give you so much hope. These 8 negative emotions are universal. I still experience them. You experience them. We can't get away from them. Uh, we can be stuck in them. So
Yeah.
what I want to teach is that, yeah, I'm going to still experience anger. There's still going to be moments I feel rejected and I feel like I'm not enough. That's just part of being human. I don't want to be stuck there though. So yesterday I had somebody tell me that they didn't want to work with me. And I noticed like that trigger of I'm not enough. I'm not good enough. I noticed that rejection created this sting. Like I could get totally triggered and tumble into these thoughts of shame that I'm not enough as I am. But there, as I'm like shucking corn. We were having corn on the cob. I was shucking corn. I didn't put any music on. I just wanted to sit with what I was feeling, this feeling of being rejected, and then work through the exercises in my mind to get out of that feeling and get back to the constant state of joy that's always there behind the clouds of these negative emotions. But we can live there. And I lived there for decades. You just don't have to. The good news is that these are universal emotions. They have universal themes of like behavior and thought patterns. And once you can recognize them, you can totally dismantle them and get out of them. You just don't know you're stuck in a trap.
Yeah, it's the recognizing that there's something you can do different.
There's something you could do, something you could believe different.
You don't even have to be like, just this can apply to anybody, anywhere, because you don't even have to be a miserable person. You don't have to be addicted to anything. You could just be, you could be like just below the surface of happiness. And that's where you're coasting, right? But you just can't.
Yeah, like a lot of people, like you're saying, a lot of people live with this cloud of anxiety.
Oh, yeah.
Like, we got a really nice life, but I'm kind of always waiting for the other shoe to drop. I'm always like just a little bit worried that things could go wrong at any moment, and that everything I've worked so hard for could crash down around me. Well, anxiety is just one of the 8 bad moods. It's the emotion of fear. And we all experience fear, but it doesn't need to be a prevalent state. You know, fear can be an acute situation. It can happen because of a trigger. We don't need it to be hanging around in the form of anxiety for days on end, weeks on end, or months on end.
So for me as well, anxiety is something I still struggle with. Like that, I would have to say that anxiety is probably the one thing that has stuck around. You're like a little stubborn stain. You know what I mean? Like it's just there. It doesn't rule my life anymore. Because there was a point in my life where it completely ruled everything.
Yeah.
But the thoughts creep up, right? You know, 2023, I was working for a company, giving it like 180%, killing myself, was not seeing a return, ended up getting packaged out. And then, so I was packaged out. And
man, after giving everything to them. Oh, that hurts.
No, it's one of those things where not only was I shocked, but also like the reverberation could be felt among. We were acquired like a year prior, but like it was a shock to many people, and that's fine. It was a blessing in disguise.
It was
the universe telling me,
now
is your time to live.
It was actually like, it's so interesting. Of course, that's immediately where my mind went, was that you weren't happy working as much as you were for not being recognized for it. There was a piece of you that said, I'm designed for more than this. And that you know, a higher power, God, the universe, whatever it is that you subscribe to, something bigger than you was protecting you from that bad situation so that you could go shine. In the moment, though, it doesn't feel like it. In the moment, it feels like a big rejection.
It does. It did. It felt like it was interesting though, because that year I lived a lot in anger and resentment.
Of course.
And I kept saying to my direct, boss at the time, I'm like, I'm angry, I'm pissed off. This is not my default anymore. Like something has to change. And I think I was holding out for that change to happen, but thinking at the time that it was going to come from within the company, right? But, getting packaged out, I was like, okay, I'm free from them. So what do I do now? Right? So, and this, led to this podcast, and it led to me finishing my book, and led me to all of these different things. And it led to
Congratulations.
Thank you. And it led to me realizing my worth.
Yes.
And not being afraid to ask for it. And that was, I think, the biggest lesson, because there was a period there when I was, realizing my worth, where I was kind of teetering on pride and just realizing my worth, because they're so close together that they could get crossed over. Mm-hmm. And, I had never thought about pride as being one of those negative emotions until I read what you had to say. But it is, though. Because pride comes from ego, and ego prevents us from experiencing so many things.
Yep, absolutely.
As a human being, 2024 has been an extraordinarily great year. I have had opportunities show up that I didn't even really dream were possible. And I just am so deeply rooted in gratitude and continuously, like, you keep your journal, right?
Yeah.
Every day of 3 things. My morning ritual has been for 8 years to press my fingers out when I wake up on the mattress and like just feel the firmness of that mattress, grounding, and speak 5 things at minimum that I'm grateful for. And it's when it's not about the things. I realized it through the work that everybody wants to have wealth and to have riches, I guess, if you will. But I realized that's not actually what I want. What I want are options. So it's different. So like, there's no, I don't want to be a billionaire. It's, I want to be able to call my best friends up and say, let's go to Martha's Vineyard for a week and do a workation. Like, let's just do that. Options. So like how that comes about through hard work and dedication, but recognizing that it's not about number signs. It's about how you can spend your life in a state of quality. And quality doesn't mean wealth and luxury and all that. It just means connections and happiness.
Well, your gratitude practice is beautiful. And gratitude is one of the signature emotions of happiness. The more, like, we can't overdo it. We can't overdo gratitude. As much as we want to say I'm grateful, we're not saying it enough, because the more we say it, the better we feel. And we come to learn we can be grateful for everything. I wanted to go back to your really awesome and vulnerable story about breaking your back for this company that then turned their back on you, and how much like that can hurt. Of course, I would be mortified if that happened to me. And then how it ends up being like the greatest gift. And you're like, oh my gosh, I finished my book. I start this podcast. All these different things are happening. Like, my life is so much better now that this terrible thing happened. And so this is one of the, I'm kind of linking this back to anxiety and fear too, because fear is the one emotion that gets all of us. The ego is always afraid of what can hurt it and kill it. And we're always afraid. Always. We're always afraid, and it'll never go away. We can't get rid of fear. And so anxiety, like a state of anxiety, is just kind of unresolved fear that we could die and things could hurt us and things could harm us. Well, the resolution of that is trust. And how do we build trust? And the more faith and trust we have that we're being provided for and loved and cared for, the less the anxiety has to be. One of my favorite prayers is the Lord's Prayer. And in that prayer, you say, give us this day today's bread. We don't say, give me 10,000 days worth of bread. We say, God, give me today's bread, just what I need for today. And I meditated with this monk named Mooney. And Mooney, we would do this meditation and we would chant this mantra. And I had a lot of anxiety at the time. And the mantra was, I'm all right now, because all my needs have always been met. And we would say it over and over and over. I'm all right now. All my needs have always been met. And after repeating that for months on end with Mooney, I'm like, man, Mooney, I really like this chant, that I'm all right because my needs have always been met. And he's like, yeah, of course your needs have always been met. You wouldn't be here right now if they weren't. Everything you've needed to survive has always shown up for you. Your daily bread has always been there for you every single day. Even when it felt hard, you were being loved and provided for and supported, and your needs were met and you were able to survive. And so there's 2 exercises that I like to do with this. The first is connecting the dots. Steve Jobs gave a commencement speech to Stanford, and he talked about how some of the greatest disappointments in his life ended up turning into the greatest gifts. And he said, I can't connect the dots moving forward. We don't know. We're afraid of the unknown. We don't know what's going to happen next month or next year. We don't know if we're going to have enough money to survive. But we have to trust the dots will connect, and we're going to be all right, and our needs will be met. And so I do this by connecting the dots backwards. an exercise anyone can do is write down 3 of the hardest experiences you had to go through. I know this can be tough. If some of them are not if you're not ready to go into your hardest experiences, just write down 3 hard experiences you went through. And then I want you to write down, what did I learn? And how did that experience actually help me become a greater version of myself that I wouldn't have been without it? And when I do this, I'm like, oh, okay, so maybe the universe knows exactly what it's doing. And as I'm fighting and bucking and saying, I don't want this thing to happen, it's actually helping me become a greater version of myself. And then the other thing to do is to every single day I pray. And every day I pray for guidance. And I say, God, thank you for all my blessings, but then guide me today. And no matter what you bring me, give me the faith to know that that's what I need today. And that prayer eases my anxiety because I'm asking for whatever shows up to be guided from God. And then I'm asking for God to tell me when it shows up and I don't want it, to rest my mind at ease that this is actually going to be for my greatest good. And that's a truth. It is an absolute truth that absolutely everything that's happening to us is grace. Sometimes it's fierce grace. Sometimes it's that pride that's in the way and we need to be knocked down so that we become humble. But everything is actually grace.
So it's interesting because that belief system ties into psychology by the fact that what we would call it in psychology is a resiliency tool. So we use this often in a little different but similar concept. So you think of any time prior to now where you thought everything was going to fall apart and you weren't going to get through it. And then what happened? Ask yourself what happened.
I got through it.
You got through it. And now think about how you got through it. What were the things that happened or you did in those moments that got you through it? You can apply them now in this exact situation. So there's a lot of
I rolled up my sleeves. I worked harder. I asked for help. I studied something. I learned something.
Or I just fell to the ground and cried for hours, and then I felt better after the release. Like it's such a nuanced sort of. It's going to be different for everybody, but the fundamental core pieces of it are going to be the same. The emotions are the same. And everybody wants happiness is the same, right? Because I don't think there's anybody out there that if you were to ask them really, do you want to be happy? That could look at you and say, well, they might just for spite. But, I think everybody wants to be happy. But happiness is not something you get. Happiness is something that you are.
Oh, mic drop. CK. You just nailed it.
But it's a state of mind. You are wonderful, by the way. Love that you have faith. Love that. I think it's important to have faith, and I think
I didn't have it in the dark times. And I was so smart. Remember how smart I was that I thought I knew everything. I would look at people with faith and I would say, well, I know that they're really happy because they have this illusion of like a higher power they can fall back on. Too bad they're stupid and that's not real. But I recognized at least that people with faith were happier than I was. I just couldn't admit that they were right. But yeah, it's a lonely place when we think that that we're not an eternal being. It's a really lonely place when we think that this is just some random occurrence. Again, I can empathize with people who think that way. I thought that way. But, the more you open up to the magic of the world, the more you start to see, oh, wow, man, everything is kind of happening miraculously and magically, and it's all connected in ways that are so much beyond logic that there's no other explanation other than we're eternal and there's something guiding us that's bigger than us.
So what's next for you?
That's a great question that I don't fully have an answer for.
And that's fine.
I am in this daily bread phase where I'm like, just let me be a light to whoever needs it today. Whoever I'm supposed to talk to today, let me say the thing that they need to hear. Let me be where you want me to be. I am just a servant right now. And I've got 4 young kids, and I'm their dad. And I've got an amazing wife, and I'm her husband. And so I want to be of service to my family, and then just wherever God is placing me, I just want to help those people that I can have an impact feel better about their life. And that's where my mind is. I don't have like some giant goal right now that I'm chasing after. It's more just a daily thing.
And you know, that's the beautiful thing, right? Because that's perfect. And I
For
often use,
now. For
well, for
now.
now, exactly. But I often use the phrase, I think even on my podcast or Podmatch sort of profile, I say people who've gone through it and then came out the other side finding their own definition of success. Because success is not what society has told us. Success is what you decide it is for you. And that's going to look different for everybody. For everyone at home, the book is called Good Mood Revolution, available in bookstores and online, or primarily online.
Yeah, it's online. So
Online.
Amazon's a great place to grab it.
Perfect. So go get that book. I don't think you're gonna regret getting the book. Just based on this conversation. That's my gut feeling. Also, if you want to check out more of Matt, subscribe to his Good Mood Revolution podcast. And you can also head over to, I'm going to find it. I had it up like 2 seconds ago.
Oh, my website?
MattO'Neil.com.
That's right. That's right.
So MattOneil.com. I will put it in the description as well. So if you go there, you'll actually be able to find the book, the podcast, and the man himself. You can sign up for coaching, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
See?
But man, CK, I have to just give you tremendous amount of props, man. You are making the world a better place with what you're doing. When I was checking out your podcast and I was seeing the depths of your vulnerability and like how authentic and how real you are, that is what people resonate with. And that's why you're having such great success with this.
I appreciate it. Full disclosure, I don't process compliments well. They make me uncomfortable. So it's something I'm working on.
Hey, you're doing great, man.
Yeah, I'm just like, thank you. I don't know, if like people were to watch back while you're saying that.
Hey,
it's like,
hey, can I just say one thing about that?
Yeah.
I write about this in my book in the chapter on love. And so my editor was like, I wrote a whole chapter on how to be loving. And my chapter was about how to choose love second when we fail to choose love first. When we find out that we weren't being loving, that it's totally cool. And then all we have to do is just choose to be loving now. Like forgive yourself for not being loving. And then now let's choose to be loving now. That was the chapter. And my editor is like, hey, I feel like this chapter on love is missing love yourself and practice receiving love. And I was like, oh, you are so right. And so I added a section in the book about how to accept a compliment and and this is me, right? I have a hard time when people just shower praise on you, just like sitting in there and not feeling uncomfortable, like just receiving it. But the extent that we can actually just sit in a compliment and I know it's uncomfortable. It is for me, at least. It sounds like it is for you too, but like allowing that to just be received and to just feel fully loved and fully seen is one of the keys to then being able to express love at a higher level. So I'm glad you mentioned that.
Yeah, it's great because I totally get it. I believe that. I subscribe to it, and it's one of those things that I will always say that I'm still on that journey, as we both are. We're still on that journey forever. That's what we're doing in our lives.
My wife is the same way. So she read the book. She was my first reader. And she read that section and, I'm always complimenting her. And so after she read the book, I was like, oh man, you look beautiful today. And she says, thank you. She's like practicing just receiving and not complimenting me back, immediately, which is what we want to do.
Yes.
And I was like, hey, great example of receiving there, Katie.
There you go. Well, you were a pleasure to have on. go keep spreading light. Thanks for choosing my show to come tell your story. Everyone at home, mattoneil.com. Check out the book, check out the podcast, sign up for coaching. You could use it. Everybody could use it. And I wish you the very best. And until next time, everyone, take care.
For media and sponsorship inquiries, email info@cksims.com or visit cksims.com and fill out the contact form. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss an episode. A new episode airs every Saturday. CKS Media.